Welcome to Bite-Sized Democracy, a weekly show focusing on issues around democracy on the African continent. Our show gives you a snapshot of what's happening in Africa in fun, informative, bite-sized segments. Please do join us in conversation. Like us on Twitter, our page is at Afrique_Democratic, and please do like our Facebook page, African Democratic Institute. On today's show, I have the leader of the Democratic Alliance, Mr. Mmusi Maimane. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Okay, we might as well just get deep into it. As a young man growing up in Soweto during the apartheid era, did you see yourself, did you want to be a politician?
You know, the thing about growing up in Soweto is that you may not be interested in politics, but politics is interested in you. Because everything that you do has got politics to it. And I have found that in many ways, as a young South African growing up, we all were engaged in a social activism. None of us would have thought we wanted to do this for positions or for some reward. But I think even now, I'm not certain that my drive is around the position. I'm certain that my drive is always about activism, social activism.
So this clearly started at a young age, and you were the first and youngest black leader of the biggest opposition party in South Africa. What does that mean to you?
Look, I think it matters in as far as the history of our country, the history of the Democratic Alliance. But to me personally, I've never thought to myself, that's what I am. I've always thought to myself, I've been given an opportunity to impact society for better. And therefore, what do you do with that opportunity? Where do you take it forward? What impact can you make for South Africans, for Africans? So it won't matter. You know, there's a great philosopher who says, worry not about the stage you are on. Worry that you've got something worthwhile to say.
Very profound. Most opposition parties in Africa are led by much older leaders in terms of age. Do you think this has any bearing on their performance as opposition parties?
I think it has a bearing on what happens in leadership in general. I think part of the challenge with SADC, at the risk of sounding ageist, is that we've inherited national liberation movements, and so everybody thinks in the national liberation movement context. Everybody wants to emulate national liberation movements. We've got to get beyond that. We've got to get to a point where we say to ourselves, how do we introduce a generational shift? That's not a question of just saying, let's get young people. That's a question of saying, what new ideas and ideals, what is the future we want to see? And I think that's the better question now. So when I think about it, it's immaterial. I've had some old leaders who think in new ways and innovative ways. I've also had some young leaders, some of them younger than me, who lead as though we are wanting to remember an old past, as if the Berlin Wall is still up, or as if Africa is still stuck in a particular prison. What we need now is new ideals, leaders with new ideas to take us forward. So that's the privilege of the work.
Said it's not about young people, it's about the quality of the leader. Do you think that the leaders that we have now, are they grooming young leaders to come after, or leaders in general? Are there any succession plans when it comes to African leaders?
I think it's one of the saddest bits actually, is that people once they get into power tend to hold on to power for a long time. I think also society isn't just led by one person who's concentrated in the presidency or in the top of a political party. I think we need to be grooming leaders across all sectors. Where are the young business leaders? Where are the young leaders of NGOs, of churches, all of those? So society must be led. Otherwise, if you concentrate leadership just on one area of society, that leadership must operate within the institutional framework of that society, must achieve that. So I'm often very conscious about saying we must broaden leadership rather than narrow it to one person. But there's no doubt about the fact that in political leadership, you often find many opposition leaders don't even adhere to the democratic dictum that says you stay for a particular period of time when you can take the organization forward and then you exit.
Speaking of the church, you're not just a politician, you're also a preacher. How does that influence, or does it influence your political career?
It does. I have a deep faith. I faith born out of the fact that I have a relationship with Jesus Christ. That's a personal faith. It's not so that other people can't hold their faith, because everyone else is entitled to it. But personal faith that influences how you view issues. You know, it's out of that faith that I learned justice. Learn the fact that humanity, that you must do what's best to bring justice in the world. It's out of that faith that you learn non-racialism. When you can sit down and say, perhaps my faith dictates that everybody's created equal. Therefore, when you look at someone, you can't say on the basis of the color of your skin, you're less than, whatever the case might be. So, my faith has a profound impact on that sense. Although I'm not in a project to try and convert everybody in my faith politically, it's the faith that has become something so personal that it inspires certain values. It's your faith that lets you say, corruption is evil, can't get into it. So it's been a guiding principle.
You're also the chairman of the Southern African Platform for Democratic Change, also known as SAPDEC. And what do you think what is your view of opposition politics in Africa?
I think what's going to be important is that we are all, as opposition leaders, suffering in an era of national liberation. The work that has to happen in the SADC region is how do we transition into a post-liberation movement. And I find the worst type is that if you get opposition leaders that want to emulate it. The best case is for us to mature that and mature democracy. And I think that was an important lesson we learned at ECOWAS about that region and how it responded to the Gambia was a positive development, because that said that in fact we are maturing, that we can't have these leaders that stay forever, that override the constitutional mandate of opposition.
So, as the chairman of SAPDEC, what do you envision the platform achieving?
We've got to capacitate leadership development. We've got to contest for certain values. Opposition is tough in Africa. Opposition often dies out quite quickly. So how do we ensure that there's capacitation of opposition leaders? How do we knowledge share across the platform so that different countries have got different relationships? How do we ensure that in all those respective countries we can achieve democratic change? That the institutions are well looked after, that the values are aligned, democratic values, and then ultimately that you breed a leadership that upholds them, because you don't want to start a revolving door of much of the science.
And then make it a bit lighter, take it a bit lighter. What are your key hopes and aspirations for Africa as a continent?
Africa is going into a profound era. We're going to see the highest population growth in Africa. That has potential for what middle class people can get in. Africa has the highest opportunity for in fact development, innovation. So my dream for Africa is an Africa that is prosperous, that is for all, that ensures that we not just depend on commodities, but we can develop those so that it's to the prosperity of Africa. That we can enter into a democratic era where leaders don't have to stay and be dictators. So there is some incredible work that Africa can do, and I'm excited about that project. I think this is going to be Africa's century.
If there's a young opposition leader out there who's watching you, who aspires to be like you, what would you say to him?
I suppose be clear in your head what your cause is. Be clear in your head what you're fighting for. Because sometimes infusing the word opposition might seem to suggest that you just want to oppose. But actually, you want to contest for ideals. You want to fight for something. You want to define. For me, it's about a transition into an era of post-liberation. For another one, it might be fighting that actually there be, and along with that, inclusive economy. Dare to say, I'm pursuing something bigger than myself.
I'm sure you are an inspiration to many people out there. Who inspires you? Who keeps this fire alive in you?
Funny enough, it varies. I have a huge admiration for many different leaders. I was quite inspired by what even President Barack Obama was able to do for the US. But I'm also inspired by, more than anything, you know, one of the things that keeps me awake at night, more than anything, I once went to campaign in the Eastern Cape, an eastern part of South Africa. I arrived and a woman was living in a shack. And the roof of a shack literally was like a skylight. It had holes in it. And I remember sitting with this woman, we were trying to canvass a vote. I said, let's come out and vote. This woman said to me, look, I used to be an activist for the governing party, and now I'm going to come out and vote for you. Even though I've suffered under South Africa, suffered under apartheid, I'm going to vote for change. And I just thought to myself, here's this woman who now wants to vote for something, still believes the ballot box can change something. Nothing is more inspiring than that, because her economic situation is some of the worst. But she fought for something. That I'll always be grateful.
Thank you so much for taking time to sit here and talk to us. As Mr. Maimane said, dare to believe and dare to dream. Thank you so much for watching Africa. Goodbye.